Last week, Mary Felstener told us that in Nazi Germany, quote, "you were Jewish by blood, not by religious practice," unquote. And certainly that is what the Nazis preached and what they wanted everybody to believe, namely that their anti-Semitic campaign on heredity, and that the overriding function of that campaign was to cleanse the ostensibly pure Aryan race of inferior genetic elements. But what is race anyway? It's a very problematic concept. And to what extent does the term racism have anything to do with race? And to what extent did the Nazis actually practice the racism that they preached? Paul and Michael Thaler are here today, or at least Paul is here, and I hope that Michael will be showing up. I imagine that the rain slowed him up on his trek up here from San Francisco. Anyway, Paul is here today to at least tell us about the biological basis for the concept of race. As you may know by now, since Paul has been around for such a long time and been part of this year's series as well, he is an emeritus professor of biology here at Sonoma State. He got his degree in plant pathology at UC Berkeley, a master's in food science, and a Ph.D. in comparative biochemistry at UC Davis. And he is a survivor of 8 different concentration camps, including Auschwitz and Dachau, and he is the chairman of the Alliance for the Study of the Holocaust. Paul?
Thank you for that. I approach this topic with trepidation because, as you can tell, my academic training is not exactly in this mainstream, to put it mildly. Nevertheless, I think it's an important topic to address, and our purpose in bringing this topic to light in this course in particular is to fulfill that requirement that this is a general education course, tie it to other disciplines. Now, this is our tie to biology today, and I think it's very worthwhile to ask what it is that we really mean by race, since all of the implications in books and publications in sociology take it for granted that there is such a thing, and it is unquestionably so. I don't want to steal my own thunder, but let me tell you that at the end of this presentation, I hope to convince you that what is called race is a very, very iffy thing. And our definition of race, as it has been classically used, is not useful. At the end, if you look at my outline, I will point out to you that there are some useful applications of race, but they're not useful applications in the sense of either social policy or legal engineering or anything of the sort. Only useful in 2 applied fields, and that is the identification of dead bodies and for the circumscribing of certain diseases, not all, but certain diseases which tend to be highly linked with certain characteristics. That's all. Well, let me first start by saying something about race. The strict definition of race biology is very clear. But before I can talk about race, I have to talk about the fundamental unit in biology. And the fundamental unit in all biology, that which is common to all living things, is the existence of a group that we define as a species. The definition of a species is really very simple and very, very utilitarian. But the definition I'm giving you to the modern definition, it is not the one that the famous Carolus Linnaeus had in mind. The modern definition of a species is an interbreeding group. Those who interbreed are within the species. If they cannot breed with that group, then they are out of the species. Now, by breeding, I also mean not merely intercourse, but offspring that will also reproduce. Therefore, for example, mules are not a new species by any stretch of the imagination. And the occasional Sunday supplement stories of artificially inseminated animals and all this, that does not make a species. And a species must be self-reproducing, and this is an essential concept in understanding what a species is. Now, a species As I said, in this modern definition, a race is a subdivision species. So by definitions, members of a race within a species can then reproduce, otherwise they wouldn't be in that species. Just to show you that, and my ignorance of this topic, my first encounter in the scientific world with the word race came with fungi. There are some fungi that devastate the wheat fields of the United States, and these fungi are identified very, very carefully, and countless man-hours have been spent on identifying these fungi, because if one of these fungi would get hold, there would be world starvation, literally. And even to this day, that process goes on. Now, there are races among these fungi. Some of them will attack wheat, some will attack oats, some will attack rye, some will attack barley. And being able to tell the difference between these is very, very important. I may also tell you, since you're dying to learn about fungi, I'm sure, that you can't tell by looking, and that's a very important concept. You cannot tell these apart by looking. The only way you can tell these apart is by applying it to the susceptible plant, and it will or will not grow on that susceptible plant. Now, if we had such a test for human beings, we would all be a lot happier. Unfortunately, we do not have such human beings, and instead we presume that we recognize a race by looking. Well, let me go back also. I promised to define racism for you, since I've defined race. Racism is the belief that a member of one or more races is inferior and therefore is superior and has a superior claim to more rights and privileges. I'll repeat that. Racism is the belief that a member of one or more is inferior, and therefore the superior can claim more rights and privileges. This racism then legitimizes exploitation. It implies extra rights and privileges. Its purpose is to justify discrimination, segregation, colonialism, slavery, and ultimately genocide. Now, going back to, I'm with race in this presentation, and Dr. Thaler will be dealing with racism. But you'll see inadvertently that in the original definition of race, some racism crept in. But let's talk about, for a moment, about the need for this kind of taxonomy. Taxonomy is a science that is practiced by all biologists in one form or another, and it is often regarded as a necessary evil. And it is not really thought of for a long time as the cutting edge of science. And the curse that was placed on this, and it's literally a curse, was by dear old Carolus Linnaeus, whom we so revere, and we do revere him, for bringing order to the living world. He's the one who named genus and species and so forth, but because it brought a mental image to the mind in which the world is made up of pigeonholes, and all the living things are plopped into pigeonholes. Now, luckily, one of the great thinkers of the 19th century liberated us from this concept. His name was Charles Darwin. But the original curse is hard to get rid of, and so the taxonomy isn't looked upon with such favor. But it's very, very important. There are things that taxonomy needs to accomplish. One, it needs to define the living unit, the species, the genus, the family, and so forth. Second, it must name it unambiguously. So once it identifies it, it names it. And third, it must define its relationship to other living things. Now, this definition of relating it to other living things is what modern thinking brought about. The original proponents of taxonomy, Carl Linnaeus and such, they were not exactly interested in relationships in the sense that we're interested in it today, but they did look for order. They wanted to bring order out of chaos. And so now you have a mental image of all these empty pigeon boxes up on the wall, and we're going to put something in those pigeon boxes. Well, Carolus Linnaeus was a botanist, and his parents, being ambitious, wanted him to go to medical school, and eventually he did go. But he worked on plants first, and it wasn't until the 10th edition of his book that he recognized that there are animals around. And after the 10th edition, he not only recognized that animals are around, but he looked around the world. Now remember, he is not naming all kinds of animals all around the world, and it's inevitable, I mean, even if you're dense, he was certainly not dense, that associate places with names, and therefore he divided the, quote, races of man into 4 groups. And he emphasized, and I want to make it clear, that Linné emphasized that these were equivalent groups. They were equivalent groups. There was no hierarchy above and below. And so he said that in the order of listing, the first group was Americanus, which are Americans, Europaeus, which was Asiaticus, which was the Asians, and the Afar, which were the Africans. Now notice that he didn't have the standard European preconception of putting the Europeans on top. So now, if you wanted to create a mental image, you would think of a flat plane, which is divided in 4 ways, and where there's nothing either superior or inferior existing. Well, as scientists to have, especially bright scientists, Carolus Linnaeus had students. And he had a very, very bright student whose name was Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, who lived between 1752 and 1840. I just call that to your attention because that brackets the American Revolution. And in this is the era in which Jefferson's Declaration of Independence occurs, the era in which The Wealth of Nations is published, and this is the era in 1775 that Blumenbach submits his Ph.D. thesis. Blumenbach, by the way, became a professor at Göttingen University. He was there all the time. He collected skulls like you would not believe. Some of you who may recall Bronowski's series on TV, or you may have seen him in some class, Bronowski shows the collection that Blumenbach had of skulls. Now, Blumenbach also had a great aesthetic sense, and that's obvious in his collection of skulls. So let me say that between 1775 and 1795, Blumenbach wrote several editions of his book. That's not unusual in science. You publish a book, buy it, then you change it a little, they buy some more. Okay, well, that's not really the reason. Blumenbach reviewed his adored master's organization of mankind, and he had tremendous respect for Linné, and disagreeing with Linné is pretty much like, you know, a professor at Sonoma State disagreeing with a Nobel Prize winner. It's, you know, you can do it, but you don't look like you won any great prizes. So Friedrich Blumenbach reconsidered, and that he did not consider the entire population of the world, and therefore he had to introduce the Malay in the group because they're not mentioned there, all those little islands. Now remember, at this time there are explorers running all around the world. These people go in ships, and according to the theories of some social scientists, explorers became the racists, and the theory is that the explorers, unlike Marco Polo, went from one place to another. When Marco Polo went from one place to another, he saw variations in human beings. He saw variations in height, in weight, in color, in appearance, and so forth. But the sailing explorers didn't. The sailing explorers got on their ship, they saw their kind, and then they went to a different place and they saw very different people. But that's a theory, as I said. But Blumenbach, between 1775 and 1795, undergoes this intellectual revolution, I may say, and it is not a spiritual revolution. And I want to emphasize that Blumenbach, in his description of the races, talks about equivalence all the time. But there's a little but comes at the end of that sentence. And the but at the end of the sentence is that Blumenbach got a skull of a Georgian female. And he, I don't know when one can say fell in love with the skull or adored the skull, but he was overwhelmed with the beauty of the skull. And he immediately decided that the most beautiful was nature's perfection. Now, if you hold it for a minute, he's perfect with the context of the time. This is a time when people don't know anything about evolution. They don't even think about evolution. They're thinking of nature's perfections, nature's perfectibility, and consequently they think of the European explorers are closest to perfection, and everybody else in the world is behind them. Obviously, the most perfect creation was somewhat like them, and so he calls this the Caucasian. And with that, the bomb is thrown. Yet, in his writings, this is a man who never said that, but he moves the Caucasian above all others, and then he invents the hierarchy. It's the hierarchy that's drawn on your sheet, and you will see that the Caucasian is above all others, and then the others, the Malay, are interposed between end line, the Africans, and on the other side, the American Indians between the Mongolians. I'm sorry, Mongolians are interposed. Well, to say that there isn't a shred of archaeologic evidence is understating this. But this was a man imagining things, and he had a twofold symmetry, and then he added one, and he put the fifth one above, and here begins the downfall of the problem. Now, his rationale for choosing the Caucasian, I copied this translation out. He said, Caucasian variety. Can you hear me all right? Okay, Caucasian variety. I have taken the name of this variety from Mount Caucasus, both because of its neighborhood, especially its southern slope, produces the most beautiful race of men. I mean the Georgian. I want to remind you, any of you remember Stalin? Okay, he was Georgian. Do you remember Shevardnadze, the Russian foreign minister, also Georgian? Well, so much for beauty. Okay. And because in that region, if anywhere, it seems we ought to, with the greatest probability, to place the autochtones, which are original forms of mankind. So his notion is beauty, perfection, symmetry. This is a beautiful skull, therefore beautiful people derive from the beautiful skull, and that does it. Now he goes on and he describes the characteristics of various, and he describes the color, the humor, and the posture, and the behavior of groups. I didn't get the Malay, but I did get the others. And now I should define to you what he means by humor. Humor is defined in medieval terms. Humors are fluids. And in medieval terms, the different humors which are mingled, they're called choleric and sanguine and some others. But their translation, they really mean cheerful, sluggish, prone to anger, or sad. So he describes, for example, the Americans. Their skin is red. They are choleric, or they're prone to anger. They're upright, and their posture is upright, and they're ruled by habit. That's their behavior. That's how he characterizes them. He didn't take a head count or no population survey or anything of those. He had never been in the United States. But he's got this opinion based on what he read there. Now, here are the Europeans, and guess what? They're going to turn out to be nice. Right? They're going to be nice. Well, they're white, and they're called sanguine or cheerful. They're muscular, and they're ruled by custom. We agree with that. They're custom. No question about that. Then come the Asians, and they're characterized as pale yellow, and he calls them melancholy. They're sad, and they're stiff. Now, whenever I say that, those Chinese acrobats come to mind. And they are ruled by belief. Well, I'd like to know some people who are not ruled by belief, just for even money. And then come the which are black, and they're, quote, sluggish, phlegmatic. now, and relaxed, and they're ruled by caprice. Now, you should also know that Johann Friedrich Blumenbach was an avid fighter against slavery. He was a very outspoken opponent of slavery. And he had a library, part of which was devoted to blacks, and he praised a poet by the name of Phyllis Wheatley, who was rediscovered in recent years, who was a slave, and he had a number of other black poets in work, including not only English, but in Latin, in Greek, and so on. So he's not an outright racist in any sense of the word. But see that when it comes to the cheerful turned out to be the European. Now, I don't know which Europeans he meant, but I know a few who are not quite that cheerful, here and there, anyhow. Now, in 1795, he definitely states that equivalence of the races, he prefers the Caucasians for their beauty. Now notice, there is no argument, there is no argument about being simpler or more primitive or any of this sort. Okay? The criterion for Caucasian is beauty. It is not high IQ. So he advocates in the notion of equivalence. He explains differences between races as adjustments to environment. Now again, he's a man of his times. This is a time when people believe that the environment molds others. Therefore, for example, the reason that the Australians had the epicanthic fold was because there were a lot of gnats around, and the gnats were biting. So they're going around like this, and that's where it comes from. He didn't survey China to find out the gnat population in China or anywhere else, but that was his. He argues, of course, that the dark skin is a protection against sunlight, which was sort of a natural response. But he also believes, by the way, that if people move away from the dark air, from sunlight, their skin will get lighter in a matter of a few generations. And he draws parallels between this and binding of the head in some cultures, children's head are bound or they're tied to papoose boards, and so the malleable portion is somewhat changed by that, but this doesn't lead to any mental deficiency or such. So he affirms directly in the moral and intellectual equality of all, but the beauty of the Caucasians persists. And so his problem of symmetry solves. We will leave him, having blessed us with a Caucasian and we're now going to turn our attention to the brightest mind of the 19th century, and that's Charles Darwin. If you think of the three great minds of the 19th century, Freud, Marx, and Darwin, Marx is in trouble, and Freud is in trouble, and Darwin stands at the pinnacle unchallenged to this day. And Darwin's contribution was to bring human concepts to a focus where they didn't have to invent an extraordinary rule that separated mankind from other living things, which was true of all previous philosophic. So with Charles Darwin, as you know, was the son of a wealthy family. He was married to, those of you like Wedgwood China will be happy to know that he was married to Emma Wedgwood, who was his cousin. And no, they didn't have any problems and such. What Charles Darwin, as you know, he observed, of all, the breeding of animals, and from these relationships, he got the idea of selective breeding occurring in nature. Now, Darwin's idea of evolution comes as a result of his lengthy travels and very careful descriptions and very careful studies throughout the world. It's famous particularly in South America, his trip on the Beagle, and his observation of natural history. But I want to emphasize that Darwin draws a line from geology to biology, and therefore his concepts are unifying across disciplines. His contribution is to explain natural variation, diversity, adaptation, not in the minutest detail that would be demanded of a molecular biologist, but in the grand sweep of ideas. He was aware of the forces, and he postulated in his work that all living things face some similar problems. Among these was more offspring than are required for replacement exist, and that there is competition for food and shelter, and reproductive effectiveness was a high prize among all living things. And these standards stand today. He wrote a famous book called The Origin of the Species by Natural Selection, but the subtitle of that is it's The Preservation of Favorite Races in the Struggle for Life. So Darwin uses the term races as species subunits. He's aware of the function of species. He understands how they interact. He understands how they're selected, how adaptation works, and why he didn't know the precise mechanism. Some contemporaries speculate that somewhere it must have been on the tip of his tongue to say gene, but he didn't say gene. So somebody else got credit for that. But nevertheless, an understanding that when living things are created, they're not immutable changes. I want you to understand this because the main argument in the application of racism is that humans are immutable. Now, Darwin understands that species are not immutable, that they're related, that he groups them in these what we call phylogenetic trees, and he deliberately avoids what later became a philosopher by the name of Spencer proposed it, what we now call social Darwinism. He carefully avoided it. He considered race as equivalent. He was aware of the of human distribution, of human movement throughout the face of the earth. And like Blumenbach, Darwin was not a racist in any sense. Now, some of his followers later on did use some of his writings for racist arguments, but Darwin himself was not a racist in any sense. So Darwin's understanding of the variation that occur, of the adaptations that occur, where species will inhabit an area if species are separated over a long period of time and they can no longer interbreed, then variations will occur. But if they interbreed, then these characteristics will be distributed throughout. Well, was not the only person who misused Darwin. Karl Marx did also, because Karl Marx used it as a struggle for power between social classes. But whatever the merit of that idea may or may not be, it is not an appropriate use of Darwin's teaching. Now, as we look at Darwin's legacy, we understand that the source of variation an explanation for source of variation was a central issue with Darwin's accomplishment, and therefore Darwin brought down the world around his shoulders because you frankly didn't have to invent God to explain the harmony in nature. And that's precisely what they said about him. He found harmony without God. Now, in these times, this was unbelievable. This is a time when you could not get admitted to Cambridge or Oxford without taking the oath that you also believed whatever they taught at Cambridge and Oxford religion classes, or their equivalents. And Darwin withstands this. Now, we're going to leave Darwin, and we're going to talk now some about the validity of the race concept among humans. The people who were most concerned about human races were, of course, anthropologists. The anthropologists of the late 1800s and early 1900s approached the problem just as if they had been no Darwin, just as if they had no understanding of this. Most of these people were social anthropologists. Physical anthropologists started running into a problem. Now, it turns out that an American anthropologist by name of Boas, who was at that time Columbia University, later on he did wind up in Berkeley, was the leading light behind a thought in which racism had no rank. In other words, the races were not considered ranked by IQ or by character or anything of this sort. At the same time, a leading professor at Harvard, I'm sorry his name I forgot, but one of his students was a man by the name of Kuhn, C-O-O-N, and I want to warn you, if you read Kuhn in 1962, you just turn the clock back to about 1875. It doesn't make any difference. Kuhn, the bell curve could have copied Kuhn verbatim, and Kuhn essentially proposes an old theory which no biologist believes. What Kuhn proposes is that the predecessor of man somehow distributed him or herself throughout the face of the earth, and the, quote, existing races developed parallel at the same time. In other words, there was lines of parallel evolution going on the face of the earth. Now, they have to be parallel evolution because we know that the offspring of these are interbreedable. Okay? There are no prohibitions against successful offspring. Some of these people went even so far as to look up people who were somehow impaired, that is, offspring that were impaired, and they claimed obviously the result of this mixing word offspring. It's simply a lie. We know it's a lie today. But they promulgated this. But Kuhn and his followers, and they went up to about late 60s and about 1970, he sort of fades out. And he has only about one follower now who writes in the literature. Propose that indeed there's linkage between the characteristics of the races. In other words, is where we argue that intelligence and race are linked. So this is the ultimate outcome. Of course, you can link the races and you can put them in linear order, and you can decide who's above and who's below. And as you can imagine, all the racists in the world reproduce these books and fondly read them and do the same thing people do with other ancient tomes that are no longer true. As I've mentioned to you, the Articles of Zion fall in this category also. And this is pretty much the same level. But Boas, amazingly, now Boas first disagreed with this, and Boas is a very straight American anthropologist, a lot of physical anthropology as well as cultural anthropology, disagrees in 1912 with this, and then a British anthropologist by the name of Ashley Montague in 1941 opens up a revolution, or rather applies knowledge from other fields to anthropology. Now, genetics had been moving along all this time at a galloping rate, and so did cytology. Cytology is the study of cells. So using cytologic characteristics and genetic characteristics, Ashley Montagu realizes the way of characterizing people is absurd, because if you look at human variation, the variation is continuous. Now, what I mean by continuous variations, for example, in this room, you know, if I'm probably the shortest, and there's somebody the tallest, and there are people in between us. Joel here would probably be the other end. But there is no prohibited height, right? So the variation is continuous. So if you take any human characteristic that you really want to study, there is no discontinuity. And when there are discontinuity, the strangest people fall into next to each other. Let me give you an example of a discontinuity. If you get sick when you drink milk, you're what is known as lactase negative. Now, if you're probably then, or your ancestors came around the Mediterranean region, and probably, or Asia, or in that crescent going all the way through parts of the Middle East, not Arabs, but through part of the Middle East, and then through India and to China and Japan. And so now you are one race, right? And now if you are, however, if you can drink milk as an adult, then you're related to the Fulanis of northern Nigeria, and you're related to some Indian tribes and some North Europeans, and that's it. How did you get there, is my question. How did you distribute this? How do you set this up? If you want to, you all heard of ABO characteristics. The proportion of ABO in New Guinea and Germany, and I'm not talking about true Germans, no, none of these, foreigners. True Germans and true natives, those who haven't left, is identical. So it depends which characteristic you pick, what race you are. And it's just we happen to pick on color a lot. Now, take, for example, facial shape. If you pick facial shape, there are two major problems in the evolution of facial shape. One is the mouth because of eating, and the other one is the nose because of breathing. Now, people who come from desert climates, they need a long passageway to moisten the air that goes in the lung. Otherwise, they have permanently cracked noses, and it's not very good for you. So they tend to have long noses. People who live in moist climates tend to have short noses. Now, so the nose is a kind of an adaptation. The other adaptation is the mouth. Now, the nose length adaptation and the mouth adaptation work a little bit against each other, because in the case of the mouth adaptation, there are people who have big wide teeth, and consequently they have a big wide mouth. And other people, mostly the Eastern Europeans and Middle Easterners, tend to have smaller teeth. And the question, why do some people have these great big teeth? Well, it turns out part of the reason is that they did use their teeth, and this was their third hand. Australian Aborigines are in this category, and if you dig up old graves of Australian Aborigines, by middle age their teeth were worn down to practically in the nub. So they needed long teeth and so on. In agricultural areas, these people learned to grow their own crops. They didn't have to have such strong teeth. Australian, quote, I apologize for the term Aborigines, is an ancient term. It's a deprecative term. It's Australian natives. They had certain customs. One of the customs is that if they shot animals or sacrificed them, and they threw them in the fire and rolled them in the fire and roasted them that way. They did not have a spit or a barbecue. And then they ate the animal as is, ashes and all. Well, believe me, ashes are abrasive. Those of you who recall in your early childhood polishing silver with ashes will know that. And you can. So this is very abrasive. So they use this and they retain these teeth. If you look at the teeth of some people in Europe and also in the East, you can characterize people as those as having shovel incisors, no shovel incisors. And you would come up with the conclusion that these are the same race. if you decided to judge by shovel incisors. Well, the shovel incisors have no great survival value for people who don't have to hold things, in their mouth. Now, according to the original anthropologist, one way of doing things was to the more technically advanced people tended to get smaller teeth because they grew agricultural crops which they could readily consume, and there was no great advantage. On the other hand, there's one group of highly technically advanced people, which are the Inuit, and they do retain big teeth because they still hold something in their mouth when they work, and so this was retained. But based on this characterization, you would find the strangest associations. Swedes would be related to Xhosas in South Africa, and the characterizations would be absolutely absurd. In other words, linkages which one would try to make with race simply don't hold. Now, the last well, last but not least, I want to talk for a couple of minutes on the latest racial attack, and that is of Herrnstein and Murray, as well known as the bell curve. The Bell Curve is an awful book, a very, very important book. It's a very, very important book. I'd urge you, if you have time and you can note those bills down, that you do read it, because the Bell Curve is the intellectual foundation of an attack on equal rights that is very substantial. This is the grounding and the beginning of a major attack. Now, the Bell Curve, written by two psychologists from Harvard, Herrnstein, who died, and Murray, who's still alive, on the talk shows, and so on, essentially argue that what their cover story is, okay? Their cover story is that genetics doesn't matter, okay? What they say on the surface. Well, what's underneath it is the exact opposite, the exact opposite. What they argue is that genetics determines IQ, and IQ determines success, and that's all there is to life. Now, if their argument holds, an awful lot of effort in educating people down the drain. Let me say that the fundamental their fundamental view is that a single number, that is your IQ test number, ranks people linearly. Their second argument is that it is genetically based. It is therefore immutable, they say. And once that's defined, and if it holds, then there is no reason to do anything to change anybody's education or background, because it's wasted money. That's the heart of the argument. Now, in order to do this, they do a great many studies comparing whites and blacks, mostly American, but they did some other studies, and if you read the review in the Scientific American, and I recommend you the review in the Scientific American as well as the one in New Yorker magazine. It's the most thorough review done by Jay Gould, who is a geneticist, naturalist, and a good statistician to boot. So his criticism, I think, is the most valid. Now, the central theme of their argument is that one and only one number defines everything a person can. Now, it turns out that the statistics which they used were inappropriate, because by the same statistics, a professor at Harvard by the name of Gardner uses the same statistic to show that people have talents in different categories, and that teaching should be reorganized so as to evoke a positive response in people who are talented in different ways. Now, I think most teachers knew this since they first taught, that some people learn visually, some people learn tactily, some people learn by sound, some people learn by demonstration, etc. But Herrnstein and Murray deny that. And furthermore, they exclude from their studies some very important studies. For example, they look at children, black children who grew up in certain areas, and they say, oh, they always test this lower than the white children in those areas. But here they have a select population, and Gould cites the study, where children, regardless of parentage, whether their parents were both black, both white, or one black, one white, had the same IQ scores in the troops in Germany. But they don't talk about that. So they don't talk about the change in environment. Now, these kids are in very similar environments because they go to the same school, same environment, et cetera, and their parents are in the army and so forth. So it's a closer, more closely defined environment. And they do posit situations like this where their argument does not hold water. But it is very, very important that you know that since Boas, Ashley Montague, and numerous others, including the famous Paul Ehrlich, at Stanford, and others who looked at this problem, could find no correlation between all characteristics and what is, quote, defined as race. Race is a continuous function. There are people who simply are this and not that. You cannot go up to a person and identify them except in the most superficial sense by merely looking at them. So there is no no correlation with IQ or achievement or ability to speak a language, ability to mimic a sound, the ability to draw, the ability to create, the ability to invent, or the ability to compute. So at closing of my remarks, I would like to paraphrase a statement. You're familiar with e pluribus unum, which is an all-hour coin. The conclusion of this study is e unum pluribus, out of one, many. That's how the human species are. Thank you.
Welcome, freshmen, to Montclair High School. This year, this class is special because this year, this class is challenged.
Oh, great.
How come it's so big? Are you gonna be late? Why does everyone look older than you?
Do you have a pass?
I'm looking for my homeroom.
I need your pass.
I'm new here.
I need your pass.
Can't you go in the right direction? Not to know what to do.
Welcome to Agronomy 2.
Whoops.
By the end of the day, you're finding your place. Learning the ropes, learning the pace. Time to get away to a familiar face. It's a good time for the great taste.
50 pages tonight? Oh, great.
It's a good time for the great taste.
Tomorrow will be better.
You mean we gotta go back?
On McDonald's.
Production notes sent from advertising agency to production company prior to filming of television commercial. To show kids 8 through 16 that McDonald's is the perfect place to get together after a particularly difficult day. Story. It is the first day of high school for 2 freshmen. It is, in a sense, the first time out of the nest, a time of trial. No longer in the same classroom with the same kids, day after day. These kids now have to go from place to place with strangers from 8,000 school districts. The story starts in the freshman orientation. We pan a group of students looking toward the stage as the principal gives his yearly bullshit speech about challenge and life. The camera stops at our 2 hero kids who react with a bit of cynicism to this. They've heard it all before. Music beat begins, and we begin to see a series of vignettes of their first day. First, the kid lost in the sea of strangers in an enormous hallway. Second, the kid as the short guy at basketball tryouts. Third, being lost and getting by a senior because of a hall pass. Fourth, trying to go up the down staircase. Fifth, getting used to the new water fountain. Sixth, showing up at the wrong class. As the day progresses, they begin to learn the ropes, like figuring out how to get the locker open and how to go up the staircase, etc. At the end of the day, they excitedly go to McDonald's to commiserate and review the day. Situations. Pretty much as described, although we would welcome other first day situations, particularly in the learning the ropes area. Locations. A high school, suburban, modern feel, not dark or old. McDonald's. Cast. 2 lead boys, 13 or 14. Must be excellent actors with a sense of humor and wryness, expressive and very real. Perhaps a bit vulnerable in appearance, but underneath, eternally optimistic with a sense of street smarts. They're friends. 2 guys, 2 girls, the same age as heroes. Also must be up, energetic, real, also good actors. Members of basketball team, at least a year older and bigger. Hall monitor, 17-year-old girl, preppy and a bit of a machine. She's a senior with that senior superiority, but all she knows is rules. Wardrobe, contemporary. Look, contemporary. Music, contemporary.
He's a smooth operator in every way. Such a smooth operator, so cool. He's got it made. Schlitz, malt liquor, full. Power and smoothness all rolled into one. A winning combination that's second to none. He's a smooth operator, one of a kind. Such a smooth operator, any place, any time. No one does it like the bull.
Production notes, sent from advertising agency to production company prior to filming of television commercial. Objective, to upgrade the image of Schlitz malt liquor and its users by positioning them as smooth operators. The product is smooth in taste and an operator in delivering the kick the users expect. The man is a smooth operator who is in control of his environment. He's smooth in his movements and way with people, and an operator when it comes to strength as well as his social relationships. Secondary objective is to position Schlitz malt liquor as socially acceptable to drink in social situations. Description of commercial. Open on hero in window washing scaffold of high-rise office. As he works, he's aware that he's being watched by a woman inside. Cut to same man jogging through park. He passes two ladies and is aware that they have stopped to take a better look of him. Cut to final scene of mixed crowd at a club. Product is being used. Pan to see hero and his lady in intimate conversation. Intercuts of product as indicated. Locations. Exterior high-rise office building with window washing scaffold. Inner city park. Interior private club. Props. Window washer's gear. Glass with bull etched on side. Cast. 7 principals, 14 extras. Hero. Age 23 through 25. Well built, not muscle bound.
Quiet nights by firelight and Mars roasted almonds. These are some of the best things in life. Barefooting in ponds, splashing with swans and Mars buttery caramel. Losing your knots in all the right spots in Mars rich chocolate. These are some of the best things in life.
It's the little rewards that make life great. Mars, one great little reward.
Some of the best things in life. Comfy shoes and funky blues and Mars roasted almonds. These are some of the best things in life. Reading Sunday funnies on your tummies and Mars buttery caramel. Store hopping, good time shopping and Mars rich chocolate. These are some of the best things in life.
The little rewards that make life great. Mars Bar, one great little reward.
Some of the best things in life.
Production notes, sent from advertising agency to production company prior to filming of television commercial. Campaign idea. Everyone has his own idea of what the best things in life are. But high on anyone's list would have to be almond, caramel, and chocolate. Not entirely coincidentally, These happen to be the very ingredients found in a Mars bar. Therefore, a Mars bar has to be counted as some of the best things in life and one of life's best rewards. The executions prove this logic, showing visuals of various of life's best things and juxtaposing these with beautiful food shots of the Mars ingredients. The editing of the pictures draws an equation for us between life's best things and Mars, and the music does the same, with a funky Randy Newman-like voice, making simply by listing Mars ingredients among life's other best things, as if this inclusion were the most natural in the world. Campaign look. We are aiming for something that might be called beautiful reality. On the one hand, we want these moments that are life's best to look convincingly real, unstaged, spontaneous. The viewer should almost get the feeling that these are found moments of film, things that really happened when, as luck would have it, there just happened to be a camera rolling to film it. On the other hand, we want the images to be rich, deeply textured, and beautiful. Cast performances. The bulk of the casting should involve people of the same age group as the main consumers of the product, 18 through 34. This is not to rule out some occasional exceptions on the older side of 34. But we don't want to go younger than 18, because we want to Mars bar as an adult reward. In general, the people should look real in an attractive sort of way. The performances should feel natural. We are not looking for comic exaggeration in any of the scenes, but rather a feeling of, yeah, that happened to me, or, yeah, I remember how good that felt. The more we can get viewers to identify with the situations and nod their agreement that these are life's best things, the more we can get them to accept Mars bar as one of them.
Break out of your old routine.
Wash and go Prerequisite. Got too much you're busy doing to fuss around with your shampoo. It's if you got a shampoo that comes to Wash and go Prerequisite.
It's a brand new Pert. It's Pert Plus, Shampoo Plus Complete Conditioner all in one. For hair that's completely clean, completely conditioned in just one step.
One shampoo conditions two. Keep your hair on the go with you.
New Pert Plus, Shampoo Plus Complete Conditioner all in one.
Wash and go Prerequisite.
Production notes sent from advertising agency to production company prior to filming of television commercial. Objective: introduce new Pert Plus. Convince physically active people, male and female, 13 through 34, that Pert Plus provides great-looking hair in one step because it is a complete shampoo and conditioner in one. Attitude, mood. Energetic. This commercial portrays active, on-the-go people with a purpose. They give their all in everything they do, from their work to their careers. Pert Plus fits their no-nonsense lifestyle and gives them great-looking hair. Music. Music is upbeat and furthers the intensity of the visual action. Visual technique. Contemporary yet realistic. Strong graphic style designed to emphasize physical activity. Sweatband being pulled off, hand weight being dropped, towel being snapped to the floor. Hair must be photographed to show maximum shine, bounce, and movement. It is critical to achieve maximum focus on beautiful end result hair. The bottle shot has 2 steps. It first zooms out at us from a black back. After it comes to rest, the word plus zooms into position. This is intended to be a sharp, aggressive, intrusive action that calls attention to the newness of the product. Casting, 28 through 33. Both women are active, on-the-go people whose lives have direction and meaning. They are confident in everything they do, from sports to social situations to the office. They are attractive and outgoing, but not glamorous. Their hair reflects contemporary styles, yet is individually suited to their own style. Their hair must be in excellent condition. Thick, healthy, full, natural. Their hair color should be distinctive from one another. Wardrobe. These women have style in the way they dress and the way they live. They can afford to dress well and choose clothing that says something about their personality.
Pepsi para la sed de la nueva generación.
Production notes sent from advertising agency to production company prior to filming of television commercial. Location considerations. The location for this spot should be a middle to lower middle class Hispanic community, a community within a large area, an area of 2- and 3-story stucco or cement but not brick apartment buildings, small detached homes, an area of small Hispanic business and corner mom-and-pop stores, bodegas. We will consider using bright Latin colors on the walls, signs, etc., wherever they would seem natural to be included. Ideally, the whole spot should be confined to a 1-block area of such a neighborhood. It should have a familiar neighborhood feel for our drummer, a place where he knows his turf and where everyone knows him for his unusual musical talent. We end the spot with a big community celebration a few years later in the same block with our hero and his band providing the musical high point of the early evening. Casting considerations for drummer characters. Age groups, 9 to 11, 12 to 14, 17 to 19. General physical characteristics. Male, Hispanic American, light brown skin to medium brown skin, dark brown to black hair, dark colored eyes, white even teeth, slender to medium build, extremely cute and lovable looking types. Specifically, we will cast people who not only fulfill the above requirements, but who are proficient drummers. In conjunction with this, we will be looking for people who can twirl a baton or have above-average eye-to-hand coordination, can dance, or specifically bring some body rhythm, grace, and poise to the character playing. Gymnastic ability will be considered a plus. Also, we will be looking for people who perhaps have some specifically pleasant facial characteristics in common within the three age groups, i.e. dimples, large eyes, a straight cowlick, etc. General requirements. Male and female musicians, preferably real men in a rock or popular band, should be able to play some instrument commonly found in this type of band. Band members should look somewhat Hispanic, no blondes. Young mom and young father. General requirements. Male and female, definitely Hispanic-looking mom and dad character types. Both should portray blue-collar types. Both should be good-looking Hispanic types that look and act comfortable in blue jeans and sweatshirts, mechanics overalls, etc. Mom and dad should have a naturalness about them. They feel and look very much a part of their environment, a middle-class, blue-collar world. Little kid and school friends. Male and female, extremely cute young Hispanic-looking kid, big wide eyes, dazzling smile, and dark eyes. If girl, maybe extremely or unusually long dark hair. Friends, male and female good-looking kids. One can be Anglo-looking, blonde, blue eyes, freckles, etc. Other two should be Hispanic-looking kids, preferably with some dancing abilities and or be able to jump rope. Production notes sent from advertising agency to production company prior to filming of television commercial. Objective. The objective of this spot is to convince girls in the age group from 10 to say 18 that McDonald's understands, empathizes, and admires them. This spot is a tribute to the female gender. Look. Design is the key word for this spot. Everything should be taken into account to give the viewer an overall look of style, graphic design, and realism to what girls are really about. Since the subject is design of scenes take on the utmost importance. For instance, the bedroom scene with the girl getting her hair done like the cover girl. Let's say the walls in that room are purple. The bow in the girl's hair is pink, and her sweater is, say, purple and pink. The magazine cover has a slate gray background, and girl behind her is dressed in a rose-colored jacket with, say, a light gray silk skirt. The whole scene now has colors that complement each other with an intense design element. Each scene should be looked at this way color-wise. Every object, prop, and piece of clothing should complement each other. Also, the photographic approach should be fresh, alive, active, and inspiring. Contemporary is a good word here. Like the Dexter Coke ads, like the Chicago Tribune ads, like the 501G ads, like the Levi Cords night ads, like the Honda scooter ads, the 80s film look, 70s European new wave, but 80s contemporary heightened reality vignettes that all exist in the examples I've just described. For this commercial, the look, the style, and the music is everything. Without that, we'll end up with another boring vignette spot about girls. Girls and guys should be between the ages of 13 and 16. Again, the cast should be aspirational. Kids appear older. We don't want rowdy, street-looking kids, but we don't want Midwestern milk-fed-looking kids either. The kids should look mature, wise, and have character. We don't want redheads with freckles, all blonde, blue-eyed darlings. We want a cross-section of the American girl, some pretty, some not so pretty, but with character. We want to portray the world the way it is, so we have to connect requirements, some blacks, some Latins. This is not your typical McDonald's commercial. We are talking a daring step for McDonald's. The kids we are speaking to are filmatically sophisticated. The McDonald's objective for tween advertising is to portray happy, smiling kids in their own world. The camera is like a disembodied spirit that catches these kids in the act of being themselves. McDonald's still is God, America, and apple pie. They tell you they want to move out of the neighborhood, but then we find out that they only wanted to go next door. I'm saying this to say that there is a fine line between where we are and how far we can go. These spots should not look too urban, too ethnic, too new wave, or too anything that doesn't jive with McDonald's image. Lighting should be dramatic, but not shadowy. Location should be beautiful, but not weird. Clothing should pray, but not punk. Casting should be characterizations, but not to the point of hoodlums. Film style should be graphic, but not gritty European. In other words, we can go out of the ordinary, but we can't live there. I know this may sound confusing, but I find it's better to know the way McDonald's works now than argue on the set about it later. Good luck, everyone.